creative journey. It's easy to get lost, but don't worry, you'll lift off. Sometimes you just need a creative pep talk.
Where do good ideas come from? That's a question you hear a lot in creative circles, and I get it. But I'm less kind of concerned about where they come from and more how do you generate them on purpose. If you're trying to do this not just as a hobby, but as a creative practice, you have to learn how to do this. How do you steadily cook up ideas consistently rather than just wait and hope you figure out where they come from, or hope that they just show up in your lap. Today on the show, I have Grant Snider, who is an orthodontist a couple days a week. Not only part of the reason I want to talk to him. The main reason I want to talk to him is because he's an incredible comic artist with a bunch of great books, tons of great comics online on his Substack and Instagram and elsewhere. He's super prolific, has so many great ideas, really clever, heartwarming, interesting stuff. I did want to talk to him because he's also an orthodontist, and I think it's a really interesting aspect of how his creative practice works. And I know that most of us have to do a lot of different things to keep the lights on, whether that's full-time work, part-time work, or just different aspects of our creative practice. And so we talk a little bit about that, but we also talk a lot about how to have ideas. And I'm going to come back at the end with our creative call to adventure, something you can do today with the ideas and inspiration from this show, so it doesn't just stay as inspiration. It's called Automatic Filter, and it's about having ideas on purpose automatically. And I will come back with that. But for now, enjoy this chat that I had with Grant Snider. The first thing I wanted to ask you about, so we've had chats before, but you haven't been on the show. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about was around this idea that you're the first artist I've talked to that also has a background in being an orthodontist. Are you still an orthodontist?
Yeah. So I work as an orthodontist Thursdays and Fridays. So I have this nice, 3/5, 2/5 balance where I can do all my creative work and burn myself out Monday through Wednesday. And then I get to relax and send emails and do the other job Thursdays and Fridays. So, but I'm always reevaluating that balance, maybe 4 and 1 is right. I don't know.
Sure. It's funny that you're like, I like to take some time off and fix teeth on my, that's so funny. But one thing I haven't asked you about is like, how did you get into, what drew you to orthodontistry? Is that what it's called?
Oh, orthodontics. Yeah. You can call it whatever you want. Yes. Teeth straightening. I'm not sure how you were when you were, 17, 18 years old, trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with my post high school life? I had absolutely no idea. I mean, did you know, like, hey, I'm going to be a podcaster, creative guru, illustrator, author extraordinaire? Like, was that on your agenda when you were 18 years old?
Not really. The only, I think my path maybe is, even as windy as my path is, I still feel like it's maybe a straighter path than the one that you took. But I think I had the benefit of watching a parent who was a creative person.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Find it impossible to do a regular life.
I see.
And so I think from an early age, I was like, whatever I do is going to be weird. I knew.
You had a model, yeah.
Yeah. And the part-time jobs that I'd had, I was like, I suck at this. I am like, I know I'm not just like, I don't know. I know I don't just have like worse software than everybody else, but for some reason, this is impossible for me.
Well, I will say I hated all my high school jobs too. And I think it'd be an interesting podcast to just go over every single person's like middle school through high school jobs, paying or not. And just hear those amazing, awful, horrible experiences. But anyway, so yeah, speaking of like models for creativity. So both my parents are very creative, not necessarily in like a drawing, painting, writing type of way, but they're gardeners and woodworkers and, are always doing something with their hands, building something, making something. And so I definitely had that model, but I didn't see it as like, maybe I just didn't think of it as a viable career for some reason. I don't know. So I thought I wanted to be an engineer. My dad was a software engineer, retired now does a lot of woodworking. My mom stayed at home and did, gardening, and lots of crafts and things like that. But I was like, oh yeah, engineering seems up my alley. I like math. I like science. Let me try that. Went into chemical engineering and quickly realized, nope, this isn't going to be the thing. Yeah. I had a family member who was in the dental field and he said, hey, you should look into that. So I shouted a few dentists. I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's hands-on. It's technical. It's sciencey, but not so dry, like, crunching numbers on a computer all day. And so I started going down that path. At the same time, I knew I wanted to do something with my art. Like I'd been super into drawing, ever since I could hold a pen, drawing with my twin brother, Gavin, who's another, creative spirit. But I never found like that thing that was like, okay, this is how I can work art into my daily life. I tried like watercolor painting. It was fun, but it didn't quite click. I loved reading cartoons, but I never made the connection. Oh, I could probably draw cartoons. Yeah. Until like my junior year of high school, when I saw at the University of Kansas, they had this awesome student newspaper and nobody was drawing opinion cartoons. So I'm like, okay, this is something maybe I could do. Maybe I could start trying that. And I submitted a cartoon, misspelled a word. It wasn't very funny, but it got published. And pretty soon I got that job and just kept doing it.
You heard like, this might be more hands-on, which is, it's interesting because there is an element of it that's like a little bit creative or like busy with your hands. That's not just knowledge work, which is
right. It's artistic or artisanal, or it's craftsmanship basically.
Yeah, there's a craft to it. Yeah, so that makes sense. I wouldn't have even thought of it that way. But your entry point to comics was you tried this comic, but you'd already liked comics before that.
Yes, I was like a devoted Calvin and Hobbes reader, Far Side, all your like 90s newspaper strips. I never quite got into like the superhero comics or alternative comics. I didn't discover these, like some of these cartoonists or graphic novelists existed till I was in college. But I knew that was there and I had a strong interest in that. I just never thought about picking up a pen and trying it. It just seemed like, I don't know. I had some mental block or barrier to doing that. Maybe the multiple panels thing, you have to string more than one drawing together. I'd always just draw in like a single drawing, a single scene. The idea of like making a character move through space and time in more than one panel. Yeah, how do you do that?
It's weird things like that seem obvious in retrospect, but especially as a kid, and just depending on what your world is like, you're just not aware of what the options are or how these things get made. A lot of these things just feel self-evident. One question I had though was, it takes us a long time to have any self-awareness. How did you know that you wanted something hands-on? Why did that appeal to you? Were you aware that you wanted a craft?
I think so. I think spending hours and hours studying kind of like abstract things, numbers, equations, I realized, this is fascinating to some people, but not to me. And I just couldn't envision myself pushing numbers at a desk with a computer in front of me, which ironically is now I'm pushing colors and words and pictures on a desk with a computer screen in front of me in hours in Photoshop every day. So joke's on me, I guess. But but I still retain some some of that hands-on element of my work. So.
And that was your little stint with engineering, right? Like where you're like, okay, I need to do something. I can't just be like,
I want to see I want to see the product. Like, that's what I love about making art is you start with something blank, you start with something unformed and, stick with it for long enough. It becomes this formed piece, and maybe you love it, maybe you don't, but you always have something to show for it. Yeah. It's kind of like mowing a lawn in a way. I mean, speaking of summer jobs, after you spend an hour with it, you can look back and say, okay, here's the job I did. See that visual satisfaction.
I totally relate to that. And I want to stick with this for a minute, and then I want to go to some creative stuff. But you're unique also in the fact that you have, not only do you have this other job that you do, it's a pretty serious job, and also you kind of have left it in stages, which is everything about that is opposite to the creative journeys that are glamorized or celebrated, or kind of the tropes of like jumping in the deep end, or having no backup plan, no plan B, all that kind of stuff. Like that's all the stuff that we kind of associate with what a creative is supposed to do. And that's what makes me so fascinated about your path. What do you think, what are the positive effects that having this balance of having this kind of solid other job that you do, what positive effects do you think has that had on your creative work, your creativity?
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was just imagining like this life story of myself as an artist on a TV version or a movie version where it's like 15 years compressed, and then he took the jump into the deep end. It only took 15 years condensed into this 30-second.
I love the idea of the montage.
The montage, like, that's the word, not monologue.
It's 15 seconds, but it's you aging 15 years. Too.
Right. All of a sudden he has gray hair, but he took that leap anyway. But no, I think, I mean, I guess I value stability, and I think I was never forced to like make a choice. Like, you know, there was never this dramatic moment, like you choose this or this. It's like they both slowly grew, and they slowly grew together. Yeah. And sometimes I wanted to focus more on, or was forced to focus more on, like, you know, studying dentistry or whatever. And sometimes I had to focus more on the art, but, you know, I could kind of go back and forth between them, never get too burned out on one at a single time. Yeah. And they definitely inform each other in that way. And I do get a break. So like, it's nice. I mentioned, you know, finishing my Monday through Wednesday creative time. And sometimes I just feel exhausted. And the idea of going back into the studio the next day, you know, it's nice to just step away from that, at least for a minute.
Yeah.
Let my subconscious kind of take over and let some ideas percolate. Then I'll come back on Monday feeling fresh and be like, okay, this thing that seems so frustrating, or this creative problem that was insurmountable. Yeah. Now it's pretty easy again.
I love that you said that. There's two things that I think that highlights that really dispels some of the classic myths around what it means to be an artist. This idea of like the full-time artist, you're doing nothing but making creative work. I think there's two things that really the times that I've had just my entire schedule is making stuff.
Oh yeah.
There's so many things that go wrong with that. One is that you don't have what you just described, which is that incubation phase where you get to step away and let your subconscious work on it. Like all the creative researchers highlight the incubation phase, but I have heard very few creative people talk about it, or it's not, doesn't feel like it's a well-known practice for most creative people. I love what Taika Waititi said when he's like, the filmmaker, he's like, I like to write a movie and then forget the script for like a year and then come back to it.
That's awesome.
And I just think that there's something about that. And then there's also just the fact that having a portfolio career or multiple pieces of your career mean that the pressure isn't on any one particular aspect of what you do. I think that's especially true, especially important when it comes to creative work. So I have to imagine that helps too. Just like, you know, it's not all writing on these books or these.
Can I throw in a personal story on the time I didn't do that? So like, and I might have talked about this last time we spoke, but I had the opportunity maybe 5 years ago or more now, maybe even longer ago than that. So to go do a writer's retreat or an artist retreat. So I was at the time trying to do my very first picture book, and I'd tried these dozens of ideas and nothing was quite working. And I had an editor I was working with, and I had, some momentum on it, but I just never had that idea. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to this cabin in upstate New York, this beautiful natural environment. I'm going to be all alone. I think I had 3 young kids at the time, quiet in my own space, and just, retreat to the mountains and come back with this fully formed, beautiful, perfect picture book. Yeah. And you can guess how that story ended. So I spent the time and the place was beautiful and the retreat was amazing and the work was frustrating and awful. I mean, I had these like self-imposed goals that I didn't meet. I had these expectations of how much I would actually get done, which I didn't do. And so the whole time I felt guilty, like I have all this time, I have this perfect environment, and yet I'm not getting the work done. And so you use the word incubation period, which I love. So I came back and like literally not 2 months later, after I'd said, okay, I'm going to take the foot off the gas pedal and, not try to force these picture book ideas so hard. I had this zing of inspiration on a walk, sat down at my desk and like on a single evening came up with the script for my first picture book. And like, bam, the book was done basically, almost a day, 2 or 3 days that looked pretty similar to the final draft. So
I love that. And again, we have the trope or the myth around here's an artist in the studio banging out paintings all day, every day, or just sat at the computer writing and writing and writing. And I think for me, it's way healthier to think of it more like either an ecosystem where there's all these things feeding into it. Cause even I think about that trip is a part of the creative process. Even if you didn't do creative work, it's stuff that feeds into what you're doing. And there's these different aspects, rest, nature, walks,
right,
things that make you money, things that bring, where you're actually capturing the stuff. And then there's the ecosystem, and there's also this idea of like the flywheel where this thing leads to this thing, leads to that thing. And there's a lot of moving pieces rather than this holy grail of this one thing. That's what I do. And I wish I would have kind of understood that earlier. Cause I don't think
you can understand it until you, fail. And I repeat the same mistake. So I had my golden shining idea of writing a novel that I pretty much did the same thing. I forced it so much until it was ground into the ground. And, months after I realized, okay, I need to step away from this, a different idea sprung up. So maybe those like creative, frustrating, put too high expectations on your work moments aren't all that bad because they leave an opening for something else to move in.
I absolutely agree. I've thought about that same thing as like a slingshot, where a slingshot, like a lot of creative people, or myself included, I would think, oh, what happened when that great idea just happened? It clicked. It feels like this, like letting go, but it's like a slingshot where there's all this tension leading up to that. It's not just the letting go moment. Oh, yeah. It's not just the like, it's almost always on the back of like racking your brain, gut churn, like trying a million things that don't work. And that's, like you say, it's part of the whole process.
Yeah, so I'm sure 5 years from now, I'll be talking about how I, tried to force this other project and thought it was going to be so amazing, and it crashed and burned, and then, this other weird different thing arose from it. So maybe, it's cyclical. Maybe.
I think it's really like an essential piece. You're a parent. You've got this other job. Like, how did you find time to get art going and off the ground initially, while you were like in the thick of, assuming a full-time job? Maybe you didn't have kids then, but how did you? Well, happen?
When I look back at this, it's kind of like, it feels a little bit like creative mythologizing. So I want to just preface it by saying, like, this is not as like attractive as it sounds maybe when I tell it. And it was, felt super frustrating and kind of sometimes pointless, but I worked through it anyway. So when I was in dental school, I was married, but we didn't have kids. I would basically be busy with studying and, going to school, 40 hours, if not more a week, have a bunch of work to do and have very little time. But I was trying to draw a weekly comic strip at that time for the local newspaper. And I was putting it online and sharing it, on the internet and Blogspot and that sort of thing. So I would take my entire Saturday, my only free time, and make a big pot of coffee, sit down at the drawing table, and just make this comic strip from start to finish. And sometimes it was amazing and really fun, but I would say 3/4 of the time it was really frustrating and just a recipe for burnout. So once I continued on in school, and we were expecting our first child, our daughter Anna. I quickly realized, okay, this Saturday burnout thing is not going to work. It's not going to be good for the family. It's already not good for, my marriage, my mental health, et cetera, et cetera. So I would start waking up early, before I'd go off to school. I still had kind of that roughly 40-hour work week, a little bit less demanding than it was when I was in dental school. But I would just say, okay, I'm going to set my alarm for like 6 or 6:30. I'm going to wake up and, for an hour or so before I go off to the real job, quote unquote, I'm going to do this other thing. So just by stringing together an hour, hour and a half, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, sometimes 5 days a week, I realized I could get just as much work done as I needed to. not be quite as burnout, still be a little bit tired and groggy most of the time, but but that was a lot more healthy balance. And as my family got bigger and as my school turned into the day job, I did pretty well working like that for quite a long time.
Yeah. I think we underestimate what you can get done by stringing together small amounts of time. And I also think it's worthwhile highlighting that there were a lot of seasons of my life where I could do those sorts of things for spurts, even if those spurts were 6 months to 2 years, 3 years. I don't think it has to be a full life plan to live that way either.
Yeah. And it was fun when I was, 25 or 30. And now that I turned 40 this year, it's like, okay, that doesn't seem quite so appealing to me anymore. I could still do it if there's a pressing deadline, but yeah, it's lost some of its allure, I would say.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. The other thing I was going to ask you about though, is when you're doing these Saturdays or anytime, because there's a few times you talked about like the frustrations. So you talk about trying and 3/4 of the time it's not fun or it's a disaster or you don't like how it turned out, or this trip where you tried to make the picture book and it was a complete failure or whatever. A thread through this whole show is relationship to challenge and a growth mindset of it being difficult doesn't mean that it's wrong, but there's something about me and then also just creative people. I think that's an especially tricky obstacle for us because we have these expectations of what it's supposed to be like if you're good at this, what it's supposed to be like if it's the right thing. And yet my experience is all of those challenges and hard times and when it's not fun are really, really essential. How do you think, what kept you going? Like, were there times early on where you're like, maybe I'm just not good at this? Like, you know what I mean? Like I have that all the time. What was your relationship to it being challenging and difficult at different times?
That's interesting. Yeah. So I feel like, maybe I'm using this word in the technical sense, but like creative ego is really important. So I've always felt like, I'm really good at this. I can do this, even when all evidence was pointing otherwise. So like maybe just that innate sense of like, hey, I'm, ever since I was young, I've been told, hey, you're good at drawing, you're good at writing. So I was like, well, why can't I, do a picture book? Why can't I make a weekly comic strip? Why can't I try a novel? So yeah, maybe that's foolish, but I think an overdeveloped sense of like your own abilities is kind of important sometimes. But I think the other part of that is just, I've been so inspired by the stuff I read. I just really, really have this burning desire to try to match that, to try to do my own version of that, to try to imitate that. So I think it's that like, innate self-confidence, but also just, seeing those examples of work you think is amazing, being really, really moved by it, and using that kind of as your fuel to work through those necessary difficulties.
I really like that because I think you hear artists talk about this, and I definitely had this early on, that sense of ego that, like you said, is maybe borderline on like delusion.
Narcissistic, yeah.
Yeah, there's something, I know I've got something in me. And that, I do think that's like, I like to think of careers also as like a multi-stage rocket where there's an engine that gets you off the ground, but then that sometimes has to fall away and something else has to carry you to the next level. And I like that idea of, maybe the delusion helps you get off the ground. You're like, I could do this. And then at some point there's might be, not as clear cut as that, but there's also this like passion and love for the form. That's something that I have to do even now, maybe more now that I'm really, making stuff every day, making stuff for my job, meeting deadlines, all that kind of stuff. It's almost more important for me to have a diet of things that remind me why I'm obsessed with art. Right. Like it's funny. I don't know if you have that, but it seems like you do, because just knowing your creative heroes, when you really taste something, you're like, this is it. That makes me so motivated creatively. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah. And I think the times though I feel like lost in space, to go back to your rocket booster metaphor, it's because I haven't really been been, filling that bucket, but I haven't been refueling those inspirations. Like I just need to take time and like go outside and draw something that's not related to a project, or go to a museum and look at somebody else's art, or go to the library and find somebody's work I'm not as familiar with, and just like, I don't know, plant those seeds again. So yeah, I'm curious. I mean, because you have a lot of different creative things you do. Like how do you prevent burnout? I assume you're working 5 to 7 days a week on your creative stuff. Like you don't have a job to go away to and stare at teeth and stuff, right? Like, like how do you keep?
It's not my job, but it's something I just do sometimes.
Yeah, it's just that's your hobby, right?
You
right.
Just open your mouth. Yeah, that's my other hobby, teeth watching. Yeah, I mean, I have to. A lot of it's just down to that kind of thing where I have to. It's almost it is a discipline. It's a discipline of. I have a discipline of listening to new music. That's coming out this year. That's something that it's effort to do, but I know it's important to me. And similar to that is like listening to stand-up comedy and comedians talk about stuff, like stuff of that nature. It's like an effort to do at this point, but it's always like worth it. What things do you do?
Well, no, I mean, not the music thing, because I just got out my iPod that's stuck in like 2007, and I'm like, okay, I really need to get. I mean, I get recommendations.
It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. Music is pretty serious.
I get recommendations from my brother who plays music and plays in a band, but I feel like I don't have. Yeah, I need to do more like things that make me feel 18 or 19 again, and feel like I'm exploring and discovering. So, but yeah, I think it's just a lot of reading. So like, I have this. Especially in the summer when my kids are home and my house is like a war zone, with siblings, throwing things and yelling and screaming anyway. I'll go to the university library and it's quiet. There's not that many, people studying. I can still kind of pass for a student if I walk quickly. And I find this seat by the children's book section, and they have this amazing collection, going back to like 1950s and 60s graphic design type books, like Bruno Minari, stuff you wouldn't necessarily find at the public library, to like, new releases.
This is awesome. Continue. Sorry.
And no. And right by the picture book section is like the middle grade and the YA and the graphic novels. So it's like all like this universe that I know a lot about, but still haven't fully explored. So if I get bored with what I'm doing, I could just walk over, pick up a book, flip through it. And it's like, I just need to spend hours and hours here and try to read like literally every single thing I can from this. And I would just feel so creatively fulfilled doing that.
That is
so
awesome.
far. I'm about 0.05% through their collection.
I love that, because going to the library when I was in college was a huge thing for me. I would go, at the time it was like the design and illustration books, and I would just like look at everything, and it was so exciting. It was like a treasure trove.
Right.
And I live near several decent colleges and schools. The OSU library, I got to go check that out and go. I bet they have a huge collection. I'm going to do that. That's a great tip for anybody to go just peruse any college library. I think that's a great idea. You're also like a sketchbook guy, right? Like you carry a sketchbook.
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of frustrated because I have, you won't be able to see it on podcasts, but my sketchbook is this giant thing. Oh, okay. So it's this, this huge sketchbook, which is not very portable. So I feel like then I end up getting like 3 or 4 different little sketchbooks where I can never find. So, but yeah, I've had a sketchbook practice almost since I started my cartooning career, which I mark as like about 15 years ago now. And so I'm never at a lack for ideas. If anything, I have too many, because I can always revisit those sketchbooks and find what I was thinking, last week, last month, last year, a decade ago, if I wanted to go back that far. So, but yeah, that's essential, I think.
I was thinking about how I know that you carry a sketchbook around, and I hear people be like, I'm not a sketchbook person, or don't want to integrate the discipline of that. But it got me thinking about that quote around, I don't know who said it. I couldn't find it attributed to anybody, but I know it's just like a thing of, if you want results that other people don't have, you have to do things that they don't do. Mm-hmm. And I think something like the discipline of, it's kind of annoying to carry something around all the time. It's not just something that is, second nature until it becomes a habit and a discipline. I think that's the kind of thing you have to do if you want to have a different kind of career and path. But I was curious about, because your comics, they have a lot of insight. They're clever. There's a lot of ideas in there. And I wondered, how does going out and sketching a bird or something you see, how does that translate into an idea? Because that's not obvious to me.
I don't think it's obvious to me either. Yeah. So, but first I'll say, like, it never felt like I was being disciplined doing it. I'm like a lot of creative people. I'm pretty introverted. So
right.
It's like sometimes my way, so I don't have to engage with people. I think my wife has this, this mental image of me at a family gathering, and I'm off sketching, in the same room as everyone, where everyone's having this involved conversation. I'm either reading a book or on my sketchbook, trying to get away from it all. And it's also an antidote to boredom. So like if I know I'm going to be like watching my kids' basketball practice, and I know I'm going to, be sitting there for an hour, I can either waste it and scroll my phone, which I do plenty of the time, or have that sketchbook with me. So yeah, to me, it's almost felt like an escape rather than a discipline, which, makes it easier. But
yeah, that's great. I'm glad you said that, because that's a great correction. And it's a good correction for me. Like, I think that's more insightful to see, like, what are the things that you need, and like rolling with them rather than trying to, I think discipline's important. There's a lot of disciplines I have in my creative practice that are important, but I think it's a good distinction you made, that there's something natural about that for you. And the other thing I always get antsy at all these like rehearsals and, shows and all games and all that stuff. I'm taking that. I don't know. Why do I not do that? I'm a freaking illustrator. I'm definitely doing that, because I'm always like, I got to have a few packs of gum and some, Skittles and a Mountain Dew or something. I don't know. How am I going to get through like sitting? But that's great. I'm going to start doing that. I love that.
Yeah. Sketchbook and a novel. I won't leave home without it. But yeah. So like, I think it's just about those connections between ideas. So like sometimes I'll have, okay, well, this is like a fully formed idea for a comic strip. And that's just because I've been doing it long enough. I know, okay, here's like an image I can connect to another one, a path I want to go down. I have kind of my stock character, which is sort of me, but not me, if that makes sense. Yeah. My avatar that I can put into these situations. But other times I'm just, just mining for images around me. So like you mentioned, like watching a bird. So like, yeah, I feel like my sketchbook lately has turned into like, middle-aged guy bird watching. And I'm okay with that.
We're going hard on birds too.
I'll see like
turning 40, because it's this Merlin app. And we're like collecting them like Pokemon right now. It's amazing.
You got to catch them all. Yeah, no. And I think that's like, especially if you live anywhere near, a place where like we have like birds migrating, I assume to the Gulf of Mexico. I don't know. So we have like pelicans in the neighborhood nearby. I'm like, I didn't know pelicans were in Kansas. What is this? And then I'll see all kinds of different herons and stuff. So like, I'm always noting, okay, I saw a new bird today. Yeah. Anyway, it's awesome.
I love seeing a heron. Seeing a heron. Continue. Sorry.
Although I heard, I'm going to go on a heron tangent here. Okay.
Do it.
I was at home watching like a suspenseful show, and my wife Kayla was somewhere out of the house, and the kids were all tucked in for bed, I thought, and I hear this like loud scream. I was like, oh, is what's happening? Is like a kid having a nightmare? Is somebody up, or like is somebody just being ridiculous? And then I realized my windows were open. I think it was a heron from the nearby neighborhood pond that was like making this, unholy noise. So that was pretty cool. It might have been a seagull. Herons. I don't know.
They're like dinosaurs, man.
Yeah.
They're huge. They're like pterodactyls in real. I love.
Have you seen the new Ghibli, the boy and the heron? Okay, that was cool.
Oh, I loved it. I cried. I loved it.
But I forgot what your question was. I don't know.
Yeah, I want to hear about how does that, because I'm gonna get a little bit pedantic here, because I think that I'm asking this question for me at 22, who doesn't really know how to have ideas. Mm-hmm. I've learned to have ideas or to notice them, right? Like I know how I do that now. And so I'm wondering if on a granular level, if there's anything else you can talk about, like you can even give me an example of how a bird turns into a comic or whatever example you want, but where that moment of these two threads click. Anything you can say about that, I would appreciate, because I think until you're doing that, you don't know how it feels. And it is hard to describe, but tell me anything you can.
No, I think what you said, learning to have ideas. Yeah. I've never heard it put that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Like we think these ideas are these things like, shining down or given to us in a platter or that we're somehow mining for. But no, it's a process of learning to recognize what your ideas are, what you respond to. And yeah, I'm sure I didn't, when I first started keeping a sketchbook, I'm sure I didn't know I didn't know how to learn how to have ideas yet. I think just lowering your barrier to entry of like, okay, what should I put in there? Just put everything in there. Don't have a filter really. That's a hard thing because I like to draw well. I don't always like my drawings. I don't always draw well. And most of my drawings in my sketchbook are scribbles, doodles, ugly, bad drawings. And I could get hung up and be like, oh, this drawing's not very good. I don't want to draw my sketchbook because I don't like that drawing. So getting past that is important. Just noticing, okay, here's a painting I liked. Here's a tree that looked cool. Here's a random thought or a line somebody said that stuck with me. Here's like something my friend, said to me that I thought was funny that I want to include here. Here's a building that I've never noticed before that was pretty interesting. So just start with everything. And then I think you'll gradually know, like, just by that process of not filtering, how you need to start filtering it. So one specific sketchbook moment that always sticks with me is for my comic, which I called Nature of Ambition, which is like when I'd say early in my career, but when I was kind of figuring out, okay, this cartooning thing is something I'll be doing for my lifetime, for a real job, not just for this random hobby. I'd seen like scrolling in Tumblr in the middle of a lecture in school. I saw this image from like maybe the 1930s or 40s of this little girl in a dress walking an alligator down a stairway. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's an awesome photograph. Yeah. Let me put that in my sketchbook. There's a girl walking a crocodile. What does that mean? But of course I changed it to my self-avatar character, walking a crocodile down the street. And months later, when I was looking back at that, I was like, okay, that's the start of a story. That's the start of a comic strip. And so I used the crocodile walking as a metaphor for creativity as a career. The character goes through all these different stages of like, he starts walking other reptiles and other animals. He gets competitive with the fellow animal walkers. He eventually is pulling this whole zoo behind, in front of him and, loses control and is back to walking that crocodile. So from that tiny little image, scrolling randomly through my laptop in class, came this whole comic, came this whole metaphor for my creative career.
I love it. I think, you said so many really brilliant things in there. I feel like I'm going to do, I don't know when this will air, but I'm going to do a series about, I heard a researcher call it contradictions. I think about it like both and or yes and it's like this, instead of thinking either or, that creative people tend to think yes and. They think I'm going to do this and this thing at different times. And one of those things is being open and then being closed. And so being open, I think that correlates when you were talking about just drawing anything, just drawing without discernment, just that's the open mode of, and I think it's why I've had the same experience with free writing. I've heard comics talk about this, and I think it's why the Artist's Way morning pages is such a huge thing for so many creative people. It literally just gets you free associating, Ouija board creating, where you're just like letting it happen. Right. And so there's these two pieces to having that idea where you're letting open flow. And then over time, it's annoying because I feel like this happens it just takes a lot of time to recognize what of this stuff that's flowing is the kind of idea that you are looking for or that you work with. And that happens to me where I'll write and like every once in a while, something will happen like, oh, that's the kind of pattern that I'm looking for. And then I'm like, okay, now I can go and like turn this into something. And that's where you switch from that open to the closed executing something. So I love
it's a tough switch to make for sure. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Why do you say that?
Well, for one thing, it's hard to choose say you have 3 different ideas. They both look pretty good. It's hard to choose that one. Once you choose that one, you're neglecting the other ones. And maybe you feel like, okay, I'm not going to get back to that, or I won't have the same passion for that when I get back to it.
Yeah.
And I struggle with this with story ideas, especially. But then once you have that one idea you're working on, now you're having to sort of like take away your idealized notion of it and make it something real. So you end up losing some of that. I don't know. I'm talking too abstractly here, I guess, but you lose some of that.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Ethereal, free floating, thing of like, oh, this perfect idea is now not necessarily perfect, but it's something,
Yes. And also, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, and also the thing I've learned too is that pendulum sometimes has to swing a few times before you get anything. So sometimes I'll do like free flow. I'll pick out of the couple things happening. I'll pick this one. I'll run with that. And I'll start like turning that into something. And then as I'm doing that, I'm like, oh, actually, I'm going to free flow this aspect again. Now I'm going to go back. And it kind of takes a few, processes to get there, to get to something that's like, oh, this is actually a thing.
Yeah, it's been important for me to learn, or to learn and relearn that, you don't have to do it all in one sitting or 1 week or one, year even. So, if you have an idea and you've done that, free flowing association where you've developed the idea and now you're kind of whittling away at it and making it what it's going to be. It's okay to put it away for a while and switch gears. It's not going to go away. That's like something I have to constantly remind myself. And maybe that goes back to this thing of like, oh, I have to draw a comic strip from start to finish on a Saturday morning. Otherwise I don't get anything done. Like there's still this part of me that's like, oh, if I don't do this idea all the way through perfect right now, it's never going to be. And that's completely false. But it's hard to remind myself that.
That's so true. I heard recently about Murakami talk about how he has this set times where he writes, and when the timer's up, it doesn't matter if he's in a block or if it's like flowing like crazy, he stops right there. And he's just learned to treat it like clockwork, treat it like a job, and that trusting that cycle just kind of feeds it. And, if it's something he was like, oh, I wanted to do more, that just makes him start better the next day. Right.
That's so hard to do though. Like I'm always like, how can I use up all these last bits of creative juice, even if I know I have to go back to it tomorrow? And that's leads to burnout. So I guess that's why Haruki Murakami has, written how many dozens of amazing novels. And
anyway. I'm not that, but I did have a good practice for a while where I would write before taking the kids to school. And there were a lot of times where it was like, oh, it's just getting good. Now I have to leave, but maybe there's something good to it.
No, the time boxing is important. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. I do a lot of that too. I wanted to ask you, what is something that you felt you had really, really wrong as an artist early on? And then what taught you to shift your perspective? It's a tough question.
Can I hear your take on it while I think about it?
Sure. I mean, I can think of a lot of different versions of that. I have one random one. This is like a personal thing. I guess these are both like more personal, but an example is like, I live in the Midwest, hate the winter, hate it so much that I would refuse to even like get a winter coat, right? Because I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this thing. And then it wasn't until I was like, you know what? I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have these winters the rest of my life. I'm going to go find a coat that I'm obsessed with that keeps me super warm. And then embracing it actually made it so I don't hate winter anymore. because I actually have a proper coat. And so that's just like a little tiny shift, but I've also had bigger ones in my like life in terms of how I move through life and think about life. Like I used to think that becoming the person I wanted to be would happen by basically hating who I was, and trying to overcome myself rather than cultivate myself, love myself enough to take care of myself. And so that's a big shift. Those are two that come to mind. But I could tell you, I'm sure I have a million in terms of being an artist of what I got wrong. I'll tell one other one is when I was starting out, I thought when I find my thing as a creative, it'll just be easy.
Oh yeah. I've certainly,
you know what I mean? And so I think I had to learn the hard way that, the difficulty and the challenge is part of the process, and it doesn't mean it's not a wrong way sign.
If it was easy every time, it would quickly lose its appeal, I think, to do it.
Yeah, I agree completely. So yeah, I don't know if nothing comes to mind, that's fine. But
no, I have an idea. I mean, I think yours are more maybe profound than mine, but I think I've always thought you have to have just like one thing, like going back to that picture book idea. I was like, well, I have to have this one perfect picture book. You know, when I started that novel, I was like, well, it has to be this one perfect novel. And if you miss that chance or that one thing isn't perfect, you don't get the chance to make another one or do another thing. And I think that's completely false. Like, I don't think any editor or publisher or reader wants to have an author that just makes one really amazing, miraculous thing and then goes away. Like, they want to see somebody try something different or learn and grow or go off on tangents and detours. So like whenever I take on a new creative project, maybe it's a new style I haven't used before, a new medium, a new type of story that I haven't told, I have to remind myself, okay, it doesn't have to be this amazing, perfect single thing. I'll get a chance to try it again. If it doesn't work, I'll get a chance to build on it if it works a little bit. And maybe accidentally sometime I'll stumble and make that perfect thing. But, that hasn't happened yet for me.
Is that something that you think you learned over time, or was there something specific that maybe helped you learn
over time? Yeah. I think I'm just a natural perfectionist who thinks that, everything they make has to be the best thing they ever make. And certainly part of that's good to have because it keeps you accountable to, putting in the time and making decent work. But the flip side of it is kind of crippling as well.
Yeah. I completely relate. I mean, this is something this is why I haven't made a published book around stuff from the podcast, is because of that feeling of, it reminds me of, on a much smaller, tiny micro scale. It reminds, my version is micro, nothing, but, it reminds me of Jonathan Larson, who made Rent, and watching, the movie Tick, Tick, Boom. And he just pours everything into this sci-fi musical that he thinks is going to be his ticket to success. And it just leaves it all on the court and just like pours everything into it. And then he calls the person at the end. He's like, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, I can't wait to see what you do next. And you're like,
oh, there's a next.
What? And I think that's such a healthy mindset. Like you don't have to, this album or this song or this piece doesn't have to do all of the things that you're capable of, right, all the things you love. It can just be this thing. And then you can move on to the next thing. I think that's a really healthy shift. That's difficult to internalize, but it's something that is definitely inspiring to me. I need to internalize that.
Yeah, I think I don't watch baseball much, but I've hit a lot of singles, and I think if you try to swing for a home run, you're never going to hit any singles. You're never going to get on base. I don't know.
I think it works.
My baseball metaphor is striking out here, but
I think it works. I think there's a temptation to. I mean, I feel like in my own creative practice, I can fall so easily into wanting to create hits, but those hits are like winning the lottery. It's so much of it is out of your control. And I do try to get into this mode of a middle class creative, or just a blue collar creative that shows up and does the thing and just has a lifestyle of doing it rather than having these memorable home runs, as you say, from the baseball metaphor. I love that. Okay. So lately you've been working. I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now so that people can go check it out. You've been doing a word project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a little over a year ago now, I came up with, I called it words of wonder.
Yeah.
Just taking a single word, a simple definition, illustrating it, and doing maybe 4 to 9 of these at a time and putting them online. And people really love words. Like I'd underestimated like the interest and how people would have like comments of like, oh, well, this word means this to me, or hey, you should try this word. Like I was getting a ton of feedback for it, and everyone was always like, okay, when are you going to do a book of it? So there's no book of it yet, but we're doing like a card deck with maybe 100 or so of the words.
Cool.
And so that'll be neat. I try to do those kind of as like I hate to use the word filler because it sounds like kind of derogatory, but when I'm like, okay, I've been really pushing hard on this other creative project. I need kind of like some space to do something that's a little more automatic and fun and just playful. I'll go through my sketchbook, find a bunch of words I've jotted down from books or poetry I've read, look up these words and illustrate them with, interesting definitions. And yeah, it's been cool and kind of like an evergreen project because some of these words are like pretty frequently used. Some are like archaic words from like the 1700s, but even those don't go out of style.
I love it. I saw the one you posted today and I was like, this is so cool. And I mean, I love words too, but I also love that you have all these different practices that allow you to never have to face the blank page, which is just great. You're constantly capturing stuff from real life without a filter, not thinking, is this good? Is this bad? But you're just filling this up so that you can always transfer some of that over. You're filling it up with words. You can always do something on that that's automatic. I think that that's really inspiring.
Yeah, the blank page, it's terrifying.
Yeah, you found some good tricks against it. Well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. I am completely inspired by all the ways that you approach your creative practice, and I love your work. I love the kind of unique way that you've set up your whole ecosystem. And if people are going to go check out your work, where's the place you want to send them?
Yeah, so you can find my newsletter at incidentalcomics.substack.com. On Facebook, it's under Incidental Comics. And on Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, it's Grant Draws. Nice. So I'm always trying to post one new comic a week. I post 1 or 2 of those words of wonder a month. And then I'm always, shouting about the latest book project. So yeah, it's fun to do.
Highly recommend following Grant. Tons of great stuff. Just lots of just like good palate cleanser for the rest of the timelines and scrolling. I'm very impressed and love what you do. And,
thanks, Andy. We're a big fan of your work in my household. The kids love the invisible things. We have the feelings flashcards. Yeah, it's all great stuff. And your podcast is awesome.
Thanks, Grant. Really appreciate it. Okay. Huge thanks to Grant for being on the show. Had a great chat. Hope to chat with him again. Feel like there are elements in which we're really different creatively, and then elements where our practice is super similar. And I love comparing notes with this guy. Hope you love the episode. By the way, you should go check out his Substack, Incidental Comics. Great follow. Great to show up in your email inbox. I'm back with the call to adventure, something to do with this episode and this information. It's called automatic filter, automatic filter. And it's called that because here's what I suggest you do. I suggest it's like a 2-day process, but it could be an every other day process where on one day you do basically morning pages. You take the free flowing, set the timer for 20 minutes and just write or just draw. Have no plan going in. Just start doing it. One way to trick yourself into doing that is if you really don't know what to write, just say, I'm writing because I have to write for this full 20 minutes. If you don't know what to draw, just start doodling what's in front of you, right in front of your face, and then let it flow. Sometimes a random memory will come to mind and I'll start drawing or writing about that. Or something I'm worried about right now will show up on the page. But whatever it is, spend 20 minutes just automatically, no thoughts, letting the free association and flow happen. And then at the end, stop, look over it, think of what is the most interesting thing that stands out in this little free flow thing. And then the next day, filter it. Don't do the free flow. Write and ruminate on that one interesting thing. And then the day after, go back to unfiltered. You do that a few times and you will start building a snowman. You'll start building something towards a real idea. And a lot of episodes of this show have started that way. A lot of comics I've done have started that way. And I think that this automatic creative work mixed with, not just letting that happen, but mixed with this filter is how some really, really great stuff can happen. So I hope that helps. And I want to say thanks to Grant again. Check out his deck of cards, Words of Wonder. Get on that. Also, massive thanks to Sophie Miller, who's a producer and editor on the show. Thanks to Connor Jones of Pending Beautiful for the audio edits, video edits, animation, sound design. This guy's he does a lot of cool stuff for us and for others. Massive thanks to Yoni Wolf and the band Y for our theme music and soundtrack. And thanks to all of you for listening. Until we speak again, stay pepped up.